Well, it is officially the beginning of spring here in Canada. And I don't know about you, but I am so glad to see the back end of winter. It has been a long and cold winter. I have shoveled more snow in the last 4 months than at any time in my life. So what I thought I would do to celebrate the end of winter is put together a collection of some of my strongest winter images and share with you guys the pro photography secrets that went into creating these images. So keep watching, you're actually going to learn something. All right, the first image that I want to show you is a classic winter image, and this one is called You're in Me Shot Again. So let me just show you a couple of raw files just to explain what I did. Now, if you're a regular watcher of this channel, you'll know that my friend Brent, he just loves to get in my shots. He always wants to be in the foreground. He wants to be the hero doing the hero pose in my shots. And he actually does do quite a good job of that. And this was one of those times when it worked. And what I wanted to do with this shot is obviously get a beautiful shot of that blue hour landscape, really cold. And then I wanted the warmth that's coming from Brent's orange jacket and also the light that's bouncing off of that jacket that's coming from the back of his camera to give you a little bit of warmth in the center of that freezing cold frame. And I think it worked out pretty well, but there was a couple of things that were tricky. The first challenge was getting a nice sharp shot of Brent, because obviously it's blue hour, I had to do a long exposure. But Brent's really good at keeping still for 4 or 6 seconds. So in this case, it was a 4-second exposure and he kept really still and I managed to get a really nice sharp shot of Brent. But the other problem that I had was that when I managed to get a good shot of Brent, the lake would get a little bit windy and I'd lose that reflection, as you can see in this raw file here. So this is the shot that I captured of Brent, but I'd lost my reflection. Whereas if I show you this one from a few seconds before, the reflection was actually quite good, but as you can see, Brent is all blurred there because he's moving around during that long exposure. So trying to get the two together required a little bit of post-processing. So I'll give you a super fast Photoshop tutorial of how I do these kind of little patches. So basically with this top layer here, I'm going to hold down the Option key on the Mac and then hit this layer mask button. As you can see, the layer mask is defaulting to black, so you won't see anything until I start painting a white brush. So I'm going to get my white brush with a soft edge, make sure that it's white there, and I'm going to use my left bracket key to go a bit smaller or my right bracket key to go a bit bigger. I think I had it right to start with, and I'm just going to brush in where that reflection got messed up with this white brush. And you can see, there you go, that has fixed that. I told you it'd be a short tutorial, very quick, very easy, and I like the end result. Now, it's been brought to my attention that some of my subscribers are not getting notifications when I put new videos out. It's like I've been shadow banned or something. It's weird. I think I must have said the wrong thing on the wrong video. But anyway, if you are subscribed to the channel, just make sure that you hit that bell icon and then you should get notifications every time I put a video out and you won't miss a video. Right, on to the next one. This is one of those images that I just could not fit into my frame, even with a super wide angle lens. That mountain is humongous. So what I had to do for this is a Pano Stitch. So I had to shoot 3 vertical frames with a little bit extra on the edge, because you know you're going to lose some of that when you stitch the pano together. Dead easy, stitch them together in Photoshop, and that is the end result. And what I like about this shot, again, it's kind of like the first shot that I showed you. In fact, this is a recurring theme in all of these winter images, is that blue hour coldness that you get. And then in the center of the frame, you've got this warm orange glow that just kind of counterbalances all of that coldness in the frame. But yeah, dead simple shot. Not that much of a pro tip, to be quite honest there, but that is how I put it together. Okay, the next image, the waiting game. Alright, so this image does feature some Photoshop trickery. And the reason why I did that is because I went there on 2 days. The first day, I got absolutely beautiful light, which you can see there in the background. So that background is the shot that I got on the first day. And in reality, the shot actually looked like this. There was no train in that shot. And I waited for hours. I stood there in minus painful, whatever it was bloody painful, freezing cold for 3 hours waiting for that train to come, and it did not show up. So I went back the next day, and what I did was I copied the exact same composition. I stood in the exact same spot, I used the same lens, I spent ages framing up my composition to be as close as I could get it to the day before. And I shot this image. And as you can see, it's pretty close, but the light is different. So if I go back to the original image, you've got this lovely contrast, and you can see these shadows, the shadows of the trees coming across the train tracks there. The second day, the light was just nowhere near as interesting, but I did manage to get the train, and it was the perfect position and the perfect timing, and I loved that blue color. Everything was perfect. So what do? You've got the exact same shot 2 days apart. Well, you Photoshop it and you put them together, and then I got this. So basically, I cut out the train from this shot and superimposed it on the shot from the day before, which had the lovely light. And I actually featured this image in my very first book. And in the book, I even say there's something not quite right about this image. I've kind of let the audience know that I've cheated a little bit. And in the book, I actually invite the readers to email me if they can spot what the problem is. And out of 2,000 books sold, I think about 100 people got it right. They emailed me in with the right answer. I still got lots of emails with completely wrong answers, some wild theories about what I'd done, but really it's just that the train does not cast any shadow. You know, if that train was really there, you would see a shadow coming off to the right, but obviously there isn't one. So congratulations to all of the hawk-eyed readers of the book who spotted that. You managed to figure it out. Now, it's round about this time that if I was a humourless misery guts with absolutely no joy whatsoever in my life, I'd probably be typing furiously and somewhat angrily right now, saying something like,
"That's not photography, you're cheating."
But then, you know what I'd do? I'd just stop and I'd just think for a second, and I'd ask myself, am I just being a twat? And then I'd realise that I am, and I wouldn't bother. All right, next image, Emerald Pool. So what I was going for with this image, I knew, having shot there many times before, that the pool that you could see at the bottom of the waterfall, it always has this gorgeous emerald green colour to it that's really vibrant. And I knew that that would contrast nicely with the complete lack of colour that you can see in the snow and the ice all around the scene. So again, I was going for that sort of colour contrast that I knew would really work. And technically, it was a little bit tricky because I was so close to that foreground there, I'm going to say 12 inches, that I had to focus stack, and I had to stop down so that each one of those different frames where I focused at a different point had just as much depth of field as I could get, and they would stitch together. And the end result is pretty good. All right, the next image, the light in the dark. Yeah, it's another hero shot of Brent. He's pretty good at standing very, very still, I have to say. So with this shot, it was absolutely freezing once again in this cave. and I knew that I wanted to get some backlit stalagmites so that they would glow with that beautiful light that you can see from his headlamp there. And it took a while to get this shot just the way that you see it there. I'll show you one of the earlier shots that I did that was a little bit of a failure. So if you look at Brent there, I actually love the composition and everything, but if you look in front of him, you can see that the stalagmites have got this weird sort of vanilla colour, which is basically the orange light that's bouncing off of his jacket from his headlamp because he's angling his head down and he's looking at those stalagmites. So it gave it this weird colour that I just did not like at all. So at that point, we just experimented and figured out that if he looked upwards, that would solve the colour problem. But then the sort of bonus that came from that was, as he was looking upwards, if he breathed out like a long breath during that, probably, I'm going to say 6-second exposure, the vapor from his mouth would come up and hit the light from the headlamp, and it would give it that really good solid beam. So not only is Brent really good at standing extremely still during a long exposure, but he's also good at exhaling at just the right pace to create that lovely blast of light there. Now I'm just going to zoom in and I want you to just look at something. To Brent's left, his left, your right. What do you see there? What shape does that look like to you? So post a comment and let me know, because I'd be interested to see just how many of you have got psychological problems. I know what I think it looks like, something cute, but we'll see what you see. All right, so now this next image, there's no snow, there's no ice, but it was shot in the depths of winter and it was bloody freezing cold that day. But this is one of my all-time favorite images, and this is called Collapse of an Empire. To capture an image like this, you really need to shoot with a super fast shutter speed. And in this case, I used 1/1000th of a second, 1/1000th of a second. And the challenge here was that with this composition, I also wanted to get quite a bit of depth of field. Usually when you shoot in super fast, you'll open up your aperture, get your widest aperture setting, and that will kind of give you a forced shallow depth of field. Well, I didn't want that. I wanted to keep as much detail as I could in the foreground and the background. So what I did is I stopped down to f14. That made it a little bit difficult to get that 1/1000th of a second shutter speed, especially when the sun popped behind a cloud. But what I decided to do is grossly underexpose all of my shots from that day for two reasons. One, it would give me that fast shutter speed with that stopped down aperture, but also, and more importantly, is I didn't want to blow out the highlights. And what was happening that day with the light is the sun would pop out and completely blow out your highlights. So then you would adjust and then the sun would disappear and you'd be completely underexposed and everything would be really dark. So I figured quite early on that, okay, well, if I want to be safe here, I'll just accept that these are underexposed. I'll brighten them all in post and I never have to worry about my blown out highlights. And those camera settings turned out to be the perfect compromise to give me everything that I wanted. And I think this one turned out pretty good. All right, what's next? Oh yes, the Star Trails selfie. Alright, so if you want to shoot your own Star Trails images at night, there's two ways you can do it. The simplest way to do it for me, I think, is to just shoot a time lapse, and then you basically blend hundreds of exposures together that you shot over a long period of time during a time lapse, and then you can completely control how they look, like this image here. The other option is to just do an extremely long exposure, you know, like a 1 hour exposure, but the chances are, depending on your camera, that could actually fry the sensor. You might have a melted sensor. Wouldn't happen on a film camera though, but it could happen on a digital camera. And I wouldn't do that anyway, because the thing is, even if you didn't melt your camera, let's just say you did a 1 hour exposure only to discover it's just too bright, you know, it's completely blown out, or it's not bright enough. You've just wasted that hour and you can't do anything with that shot. Whereas if you shoot a time lapse where it's just one exposure after another, there's not really that much that could go wrong with it, and you've got complete control afterwards in post. And the benefit of doing a time lapse is you get a nice little video clip like this. All right, so when it comes to the processing of a Star Trails image like this, you have two options that I know of. There's probably other software that does this, but the first one is the easiest, and that is to use some software called Star Stacks. I'll put a link to it in the description. The other way to do it is in Photoshop, and this is going to be a lot more painful, a lot more work, but it does give you a better result with absolute control. Basically what you're going to do is import all of your separate frames into Photoshop, layered on top of one another, and then you're going to set the blend mode of everything but that bottom layer to lighten. And then if you want to really get fine control with it, you can change the opacity of every single layer so that it's a gradual ramp from 0 to 100%. And that'll give you a star trail that looks kind of like this, where it's brighter at one end and then softer at the other. It does take a lot of work, but the end result is a lot better than what you'll get from Star Stacks. Okay, now I think this is probably my most popular winter image of all time, and this one's called Moon Glow. So I would highly recommend, if you want to do nightscapes like this, go out during a half moon, just as the moon has risen over the horizon, because you'll be surprised just how bright a half moon is. You can get lots of light in your image and lots of sharpness as well. It's kind of like a sunset or even a sunrise, but instead of it being this warm orange glow, you've got this lovely cool blue light that just works really good with snow and ice. The other cool thing about shooting with a half moon just after it's risen and it's low in the sky is that yes, you'll get lots of light painting your landscape, but the sky will be just dark enough that you'll still see some stars like you can in this image. And then in terms of technique to capture this image, it was really pretty easy because there was so much light. I think I was shooting at something like f8, doing a fairly long exposure, and the only challenge really was the bright light that was coming from the restaurant there. You know, I took my first shot and it was perfect for the sky and for the land and the mountains, but the light from the restaurant was completely blown out. So all I had to do was just take a few extra frames with a much darker exposure so that the highlights weren't blown out, and then I just blended those together in Photoshop. All right, the last image, what's it gonna be? Oh, it's gonna be Birth of a Galaxy. Now, I actually captured this shot by accident. I wasn't actually looking for this type of shot, but at some point during the night, I got down on the ice to get in my camera bag and I took off my headlamp and I put it on the ice, and immediately the bubbles just erupted with reflected light from the headlamp. It's just this spectacular visual, and I immediately looked at it and thought, this is like a galaxy shot. You know, I was actually there taking pictures of the night sky with the stars, but underneath me, it was like stars were already erupting under my feet through this ice. It was absolutely spectacular. So that's why I call it Birth of a Galaxy. And I'll show you the raw file. Let me just brighten this up. So this is the raw file, and you can see the headlamp there on the ice. And like I said, that's how I discovered this composition. So when I framed this shot up, I knew I was going to crop the headlamp out, obviously, and I knew I was going to go for a fairly square crop because I'm not that interested in what's going on in the far edges of the frame. But doesn't it look like you're looking into deep space with all of the stars and the planets and the nebula? Absolutely, tres megua fiqua. Okay, well, there you go. That is my compilation of winter images. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you learned a few little tricks there. And if you did enjoy it, please give it the old thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to tickle my bell, and I'm definitely not going to mention this. Order your own signed copy of Stories Within Stories by Gavin Hardcastle. Available for pre-order right now with early bird pricing, including free shipping and a free print. There's a link in the description below.